BRUCAST is back, baby.
I think the most important aspect here is that a great speech can have very different forms, right? That there is not one way of making the perfect speech. That Steve Jobs had a particularly way of doing his speeches. Seth Godin has a different way. Gary Vaynerchuk has a different way. Or Elizabeth Gilbert has her own very tuned down style. Very much in contrast to Gary Vee's very outspoken and extroverted style, right? And the thing is, all of those, despite being so different in their approach, capture their audience's attention and kind of fascinate huge amounts of people. Not so much because they are trying to be like the next Steve Jobs or something, but because they're bold enough to be distinctly Gary Vaynerchuk, distinctly Elizabeth Gilbert, distinctly Bruno, distinctly Michael. And that's much more important than looking for inspiration from the great speakers. You can always look for ways to amplify what you did correctly there, or what resonates with yourself, and look, so how can you kind of add some tools to your toolbox. But most of all, I think it pays if you turn your look inside and learn to listen more to, first of all, your gut. So what does that tell you? And does it actually feel good what you're doing here on the stage? And then learn from the audience's reactions. So in what way does what you do resonate with your audience, so that you don't turn up to be the next Steve Jobs, but the next best version of yourself.
Wow. It's super interesting, because in my mind there was like a right way and a wrong way. The right way is how, I don't know, the best do it, Steve Jobs, for example, and then what you're doing is wrong. So you just opened my mind here. So basically, you try to become the best version of yourself. Okay. Well, if you're a horrible presenter, that must be hard. And that's where you come in, right? So you help people with techniques and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the point. It literally doesn't matter where you start.
Got it.
And whether you yourself think that you're a terrible presenter. First of all, it could be that you're totally wrong, and that's just your imposter screaming loudly, right? That if you ask your audience how they like your presentation, that you get a very different feedback than what from your own assessment. That they probably actually like it, that you're not just that extroverted guy and shouting and putting on that great show, but that you're much more thoughtful in the words that you use. Or maybe it's the complete opposite. That could be true as well. So first of all, I just not trust your own assessment or my own assessment as much, and try to make a reality check by really asking people's feedback. Or of course, you could also ask a professional like myself or colleagues of mine for their take. But I think the ultimate test is actually your audience. And for example, in stand-up comedy is a great inspiration for that. Stand-up comedians are always immediately evaluated, right? They tell, like, I don't know, 100 jokes or so during one of their gigs. And 100 times during that gig, they're evaluated. If the audience doesn't laugh, it's not a good joke. So, and yet now you might think that this means and results in them being frustrated or disappointed or giving up their career. But that's now not how you become good at stand-up comedy. And that's not how you become good at speaking. You just learn from that. You take that as data and you see that, well, that joke worked well, that one didn't. So I probably leave that one and look more for similar jokes than the one that did, right? And you do the same things for your speaking. If you that just doesn't click for you because you're a much more introverted person, or if you try to start your presentation with a joke, but you're just not the kind of guy who's good at telling jokes, you probably look for other ways, like asking a thoughtful question or just engaging in a dialogue with your audience, right? And so literally no matter where you start from, so and whether you think that's any good, just by going out there and taking that assessment both from yourself, but probably more importantly from what the audience responds and how they respond to improve, then you're basically inevitably going to end up as a great speaker.
Well, I can see how stand-up comedians, they can have this instant feedback loop during the whole gig. But what about when you're presenting a product? You just have one chance. You need to nail it. How are you going to have this feedback? You have one chance. Oh, Michael, like, where's the feedback there?
So I would dare to doubt that.
Okay.
That you get only one chance. That's what it might feel like. But how many occasions have you really been in that were a one-shot hit or miss? I mean, yeah, it could be that this particular customer doesn't buy, but there are 1,000 other customers you could pitch to. And just taking the learning from that failed first pitch and improving it for the second pitch, or the same product, but this time to a different audience, to a different customer, will increase your chances. And then taking the learning from that second failed attempt to make an even better third one will lead to an improved third pitch, and so on and so forth. And do that 10 times, and I'm sure that the 10th pitch will be so much better than the first one. So, and that's just assuming that you never bothered to have a conversation before that one shot, right? Because, of course, when you just prepare your slides, like many people actually do, they have that meeting with the client coming up in 2 weeks, but they are kind of afraid of. They have to nail it and how to impress it and what would be a great slide. So they just default to answering a couple of emails or refining the product rather than starting to plan the presentation. And so we're 1 week away and the fear only rises. So, and it kind of it makes us feel anxious to start working on the presentation. So we reply to another couple of emails and refine the product a little. And so we're 2 days away from the presentation. And that's when we start to actually build the slides. And then that's when we actually start to pull together slides from existing presentations and stitch together parts of the story to kind of what feels like a Frankenstein story. And then it's presentation time, and we've never even once gone through that whole thing in full, right?
Yeah.
And now circling it back to Steve Jobs, a man who certainly was busy as hell, right? The CEO of one of the fastest growing companies back then. And he took like 2 full days to practice a presentation, a keynote, 2 full days on the stage at a point where the whole presentation was already done, where it was just about going through and knowing when to click and when to say what and how to pace the stage. And prior to those 2 days were a lot of days just refining slides, and prior to those weeks of refining the slides were weeks or even months of crafting the story. And what went into crafting that story were tons of conversations inside the teams, with partners, with customers, with audiences, listening to social media, basically today you would listen to social media. Back then you'd have to kind of read magazines or something like that, or read blogs. So it isn't really a one shot or first shot for the moment that you present there. You can show up super prepared there, and you can have had lots of possibilities for feedback and refinement up until the point where it really counts.
And you can always, depending on the secrecy of whatever you're presenting, you can always invite friends and family members to practice, right? Or even your plush toys, just put some puppets in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So and what happens really is that, so what I briefly outlined before is that that fear of the moment, of that stage fright that creeps in, that sometimes leads to the fear of the moment of practice, right? Because that moment of practice evokes those feelings. But that is really just one of the most helpful things, to be courageous there, to be brave there and face that practice moment, and to just take your friends, your colleagues' feedback as an opportunity for growth, because that's when it doesn't hurt. That's when it doesn't matter whether it's any good. That's precisely the reason why you're doing the practicing, right? Not because you're already perfect, but because you're on the path to becoming perfect, right? That's the point of practicing, to become better. So why would you expect to be perfect during practice?